Welcome to a series of chats, podcasts featuring the designs, experiences, stories about cruising, business, and lots of other subjects that are all to do with Dashew Offshore, Steve and Linda Dashew. We thought it would be fun, Steve and I, to spend some time going through some of the milestones, and we're going to dash backwards and forwards in time. And these books will be called the Dashew Talking Books. They will come in chapters and they will be available for you to enjoy, we hope.
Yes, it sounds like it'd be fun. There's not many things I would enjoy more than to talk about boats.
There's going to be no schedule, and we're going to put these podcasts, these chapters out as and when we think of them, and I hope that you will join us. So this chapter of the Dashew Talking Book with Steve Dashew is not about boats at all. It's about the Muffler Men, also known as Uniroyal Gals and Paul Bunyans. So Steve, can you just tell me how it all started and what they are? And these things by now are pretty iconic figures in the United States of America.
Oh gosh, you're asking me. We just had the 50th anniversary 2 days ago of selling our business, which that grew into.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was. I just realized it was June 16th, 1976, 3:00 in the afternoon. We didn't get any money or much money, but we got off the hook at the bank and the bonding company, which I was very happy to do. So this started like most things that we've been involved with the boat business, and that is we never intended it to be in the display business. But I had a little boat company in San Pedro, California, trying to do some maintenance work and keep a couple guys employed and balance that with going to school and partying. And it was very, very hard going in the wintertime. So we thought we'll look for something else. And we had a couple of negative outcomes. I think we tested. And then somebody saw an ad in the LA Times, a three-line ad, for a guy named Bob Pruitt wanted to sell his display business. So I didn't think it would be of interest to us, but I had some time. I gave him a call. And it turns out he was a cowboy, or he sponsored cowboys, and his main business was building trailers to tow your horses around in. And they made fiberglass tops, and somehow he had gotten into the display business and had 3 or 4 molds, and he wanted, I think, $18,000 for the business, which is a lot of money then.
And this was Paul Bunyan, was it?
Actually, he had he had the first Paul Bunyan, and he had a life-size quarter horse, a life-size thoroughbred horse, and a cow mold, and a giant chicken mold, and that was it.
So the Paul Bunyan was a mold. It was a fiberglass mold. It wasn't a man.
Yeah, they were all. Well, he was originally a man, but from Minnesota.
Right.
But he was straightened all the rivers and had a great big ox. I forgot what he was called. A blue ox called something or other. Babe was his name, I think. Anyway, so we looked at the technology, quote unquote, that was involved, which is basically laying pieces of fiberglass up into female molds and then taking all these pieces and frying them out, and then the assembly procedure was very crude. And then you filled the seams and painted them, and we thought, well, we can deal with that.
So in your boatyard, you were working on GRP, weren't you? You were working with fiberglass.
Well, you gotta remember, this is in the mid 1950s. Fiberglass was in its infancy. I don't want to relive the work of how we learned about fiberglass, but it was really the hard way. I put every penny we had into a 14-foot called an SK boat. These were a type of drag boats that they use on the Colorado River for drag racing and water skiing racing. And most of them were 18 to 20 feet. And I thought maybe there's a market for outboard size ones. So I got some technological help, and we built a plug and something that looked halfway decent, we thought, to our eye. And when the time came to take the mold off the plug, our experts had forgotten the mold release. So probably know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Absolute disaster. And I don't want any more to do with fiberglass after that. But we eventually we had some orders, so we had to go ahead and do it over again. And this time I got intimately involved to where my fingers got sticky and smelly, and which was the situation for a number of years after that. So that was the technology was just all hand layup, and in fact we were one of Jay Johnson's. Jay Johnson was the fellow that invented the chopper gun, and we knew Jay because he was was thinking at that time about building a big catamaran, and we were racing small cats. So we had met a couple of times, and we agreed to test. I think it was the second chopper gun he'd ever built. That was a revolutionary tool. Didn't work for what we were doing because it didn't have good enough quality control. But anyway, that was the state of the technology in those days. So it was all hand layup.
So anyway, now you have these molds and you have these. So let's just describe what they are. They're 25 foot tall.
Well, you're in the farming business, so you probably know the difference between a quarter horse and a thoroughbred.
Yeah.
So we had one of each, and what I recall is that the thoroughbreds were much harder to assemble because they had very skinny legs compared to the quarter horse. Mm-hmm. And then all these pieces it was very little technology and very little skill involved once you had the molds made. But we thought this was just a fill-in thing to help us keep busy in the wintertime. So about 8 or 10 weeks after we made the deal, and we brought the stuff over to our shop, and we're looking for somewhere else to move to, possibly away from the water, because it looked like maybe there's some potential. There was a guy called from Chicago. I'm sorry, from Las Vegas. It was an American oil gas station, and he had purchased one of these units. He had it on order with the Bob Pruitt, and wanted to know when he was going to get his Paul Bunyan. So that's how we made that introduction. And he put the unit up, and he doubled his gallonage right away. I mean, literally, they check every day. He had the tally sheets, and the Paul Bunyan goes up and starts selling twice as much fuel.
And so can we just describe the sort of scale of these guys, because they're huge, aren't they?
Well, it was 6.5 meters long, about 2 meters wide, and I think it weighed about 125 kilos, my record, quite light. And so moving them around and standing them up was actually quite a difficult chore, and it was we worked on and started building trailers to transport them and to erect them. A very simple tilting mechanism in the trailer, and essentially there was a steel platform that the figure was bolted to, and it had a long transverse axle or pin across the trailer that pivoted on. So you'd move the trailer to where it was right adjacent to wherever you're going to stand your figure up, and to which you're going to tie it, like your main sign, usually. Back the car up to and the trailer up to where it was going to end up. Tied a couple of lines to the eye bolts in the shoulder, and just drove forward. And that was my first patent.
My goodness. So this guy's got his Paul Bunyan, and he's selling lots of fuel. So then what happens?
Well, he doubled his fuel sales overnight. So we got there was a trade industry newspaper, regional, and they picked. We called them, and they didn't believe us, and so anyway they sent somebody down, or I think they had to come from L.A. And there was about a month later there was a headline. It was Larry something or other was the guy's name. An American oil station in Las Vegas doubled his fuel sales, and it had a picture of his Paul Bunyan standing by his sign. So we looked at that and we thought, maybe there's something here. I had no idea what was going to come. So at that time I was 21 years old and still in school, although I ended up dropping out. And I had no fear. I didn't know what you couldn't do. And you're not at that age and selling what we had to sell. You're not supposed to go and talk to the senior vice presidents of marketing of the major oil companies in the United States. Mm-hmm. But that's what we did. And so I had a woman. Her name was Vi Winslow, who was very much a part of the making this program successful. And Vi was in some respects too. You remind me of Vi. She was an absolute crackerjack. Your work habits are much better, but she was a crackerjack at marketing, and so she would put together these programs and based on starting with I think the guy was named Larry Anderson. Anyway, based on the American Oil Station, and I started knocking on doors, and somehow I was able to, like it with Texaco, we were able, I think it was I can't remember what, 17th floor or something in the Chrysler Building in New York, but I'm in there talking to the first, the normal vice presidents and the senior vice presidents in these big meetings and filled with people, and what we did is we just had an artist take some poster board and airbrush the photo, essentially a gas station with the figure standing in front of it. And everybody, they were intrigued enough that I sold 2 or 3 units to various people that they would test, and they got really good results from the test. I never found out what they were, but that's top secret. But about a year and a half later, I got a call from Texaco, and they said, come on back tomorrow, we're ready to sign. And I was stunned. We were this little tiny company. So they gave us an order for 300 units. And that was they had a national advertising program based on they call it the Texaco Big Friend.
So how did you go about fabricating 300 of these things?
Well, we rented a new building or leased a new building, and we had to make a plug and a mold, and that's a story in itself. That was an absolute disaster. And I had a old guy. He was probably in his 40s then. His name was Sasha Schnittman. He was a Russian immigrant who was a sculptor, fine art sculptor, and I didn't know how to control him. And he took 3 times as long as he was supposed to get this thing built, because Texaco was breathing down my neck for their national schedule rollout. And he scaled it up a little bit. He didn't like the proportions. And what I didn't realize at the time, when he scaled it up, it made it just a little bit bigger. And about when you scale something up, it's not the mass doesn't go up linearly. It goes up with a square of the increase. So it was went from about 200 pounds to 350, and that's what killed the program, because it was too hard to handle. But we started producing these, and the biggest hassle with them is what do you do with them? Because they wanted us to store them. We agreed to that. And we rented a field adjacent to our property, and somebody for the LA Times, a photographer, came by in a helicopter, landed and asked some questions, took off again, and we have some aerial photographs of that field with all the giants in it. It was an amazing time, and being very inexperienced in business and quite young, I had no idea what a wonderful business it was, because we had very low overhead. The cost of sale was low. I did all the marketing. I was traveling 2 or 3 weeks every month out sort of peddling our wares, and we had all these executives that I should not have been able to talk to who were talking to us, and it was great fun. And so here's an example of the power what I realized I had in my hands. So Phillips Petroleum had called, and they wanted it turns out they had a cowboy in their marketing program. So they wanted a big cowboy. Well, that's no problem. We can build cowboys easily, which meant we take Paul Bunyan and take his beard off and put a sombrero on him, and he was a cowboy. And, he was very adaptable. He was all kind Muffler Man, Tire Man. He was my favorite, the Mortimer E. Snerd, who won't be probably not known to your audience, but Mortimer E. Snerd was a character out of Mad Magazine when they first started, which maybe dates me somewhat. Anyway, so I'm out in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which is really the middle of nowhere, in the home of Phillips Petroleum, and we've flown into the airport in Tulsa, and so I'm looking at my watch, and it's time to go, because I have a flight to New York, and I had meetings with Texaco and Sinclair, and so I wrote my guy's name. We were dealing with the senior vice president. I said, I'm sorry, but I have to go. He said, don't worry, we'll hold the plane for you. And I thought, what? So I really couldn't leave after he said that. So anyway, we stayed around and discussed some details, and I think they ended up ordering 100 20-foot cowboys. So now we're like 20 minutes late, and they're flying me back to Tulsa in the corporate aircraft. And I think, what's going to happen? I'm going to miss my flight, miss my meetings. And there's this big jet. They were fairly new in those days, and I think it was a 737. I think it was not 727. The jet with an engine in the tail as well as on the wings. And it was standing there, engines running, ramp coming down. I run up the ramp, and here's this airplane full of people, and the stewardesses. One of the stewardesses had their hands on her hips, like, who have they been waiting for? Phillips Petroleum was a big customer. I think it was TWA in those days, probably their biggest customer in that part of the world. And they had called and told them to hold the airplane. So
wow, and they did.
They did. I didn't know whether to be embarrassed or chuffed, but anyway, that was one of my more entertaining incidents.
So let's just come on to Muffler Men today, which I understand in the Dashew family are called skipperoos. So what's happened to them now? Because now they're kind of quite they're collectibles, aren't they?
Well, there's so much irony, Sue, in that one of the ways that a lot of our customers were individuals. Like you might have a miniature golf course or a tack shop or hardware store or whatever, and you put this one unit up of whatever you like off our menu, so to speak, our catalog, and they would often get in fights, local zoning fights. People didn't want them, and so the fights themselves would be good traffic generators for the establishment. So they enjoyed that, and we sometimes had to write letters, and occasionally had to testify in court and stuff. So we were sort of always considered the bad guys, because we supplied this terrible stuff. And some years later, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years, it's been over 50 years now out of the business, but some years later, a famous designer, Diane von Furstenberg, I think was her name, picked one up and had it refurbished and had it in her garden.
Oh, wow.
As a work of art. And that word got out on that, and I don't know if that started the trend or not, but since that time, which is many years ago, we've had stories in like Smithsonian Magazine and all sorts of major mainline magazines, and like this story that somebody sent me that was just in the Los Angeles Times, the big feature story on the history of these things. People have written books about them. There have been websites set up. There are at least 2 or 3 websites which people came to interview us as a traffic building thing for their websites. They've gone on to be very successful. So
yeah, because I mean the LA Times are calling it Muffler Men are a Route 66 classic, and they're multiplying. So have you guys got one?
We do not. What I really wanted was one of our dinosaurs, and because that fits the desert environment. And when they've come on the market, they get snapped up pretty quickly. So we had a chance to buy or to pick one up from a Pontiac dealer in North Carolina that we couldn't put together quickly enough, and they wanted it moved. And there's actually a couple of people who make a business out of buying these old units, refurbishing them for people, and or buying them and reselling them. Mm-hmm. So we've where we live, it would be frowned on. Let's put it that way. It may be horizontally, but not vertically.
So the dinosaur, why were they? What were they marketing?
One of the major oil companies in the U.S. is called Sinclair Oil, and their symbol at the bottom of it, they have sort of a odd geometric shape for their normal sign, and it's the bottom of the sign, right in the center. They have a dinosaur symbol. So, and now that's a name I can remember for some. Leo J. Hoare, he was the vice president of marketing. We did all kinds. We thought if there's not a natural in the world, I mean, that's got to be the perfect place to sell 3D figures. We never got a single penny out of him.
Really?
He was happy. Yeah, he was happy to talk to me, and we sent him an 8-foot and a 12-foot unit. Actually, sent them to him and play with those, but they never bought. Some of their dealers and distributors did, but we never sold him any hardware. But that was the only one. Everybody else we were successful with.
So now you're getting quite elderly, so you must be 23, 24, 25.
Not yet. I'm still climbing to the top of the ladder, which I'm not supposed to do.
And and everything's going brilliantly. And then what happens?
Well, so part of it, I'm never really a very good manager, or I wasn't very good at hiring people, or maybe it was intentional, but I could never find anybody that could sell our stuff, and somehow just like shooting fish in a barrel for me. If I would put together a package, I go talk to people, and they say, okay, we'll give you a test. That's all we had to do. Excuse me. If they gave us a test, we knew the results were going to be good. So, and we were starting to have franchises this is when franchising was starting to take off in the restaurant business and similar industries. And so we had quite a number of people calling us for proposals to do figures for their restaurant chains. The one that comes to mind immediately is there was somebody made a deal with Hanna-Barbera for the Yogi Bear characters.
Right.
And it was Yogi Bear's honey fried chicken. And I'm back in this somewhere in North Carolina after driving through all kinds of backcountry roads, and the first thing they after we meet and greet and they ask me a bunch of questions, we'd like you to test some chicken. And they had a company in somebody in Chicago. They would take other companies' products and somehow test them, find out the ingredients, so this company could base new formulas on what the opposition was selling. So I ate 3 or 4 pieces of chicken and had to feign enjoyment, which wasn't too easy. And I enjoyed the marketing part of the game, and I had friends in most places in the country, and it didn't make any difference to me whether I was at home, because I had an apartment and nobody else. And then I met Linda, and that sort of changed everything, and I didn't want to travel anymore. And she moved to L.A. From Salt Lake, where she was teaching, and so I really didn't want to travel, and not the way I had been. So I tried hiring some people from the sign industry, and they could sell onesies and twosies, but nobody, for some reason, could. Probably we didn't have the right material for them, but I just didn't find anybody that could replace the larger programs, and that's where the real money was, because instead of building 1 or 2 for somebody that owned an amusement park, perhaps, these are chances to sell multiples, which was really where our revenue came from.
So then what happened? Did you sell it on, or because then you were going into the boat business after? Oh, no. You were going to the building business, which is another chapter, of course, after that.
Yeah, that was, I had no idea what, the problem was I didn't have the experience to realize what a wonderful business we had. It was fun. Like we would go to trade shows all over the country, trade shows for like the restaurant industry or car dealers or something like that. And so the trade shows where the people that attended them and the people that worked them were there to have a good time. So there was lots of social interaction and a little bit of alcoholic consumption. And
sounds dreadful.
Then you pack up your wares and go home. So, and at that, I really didn't like them as I got older, but at that point, that was great fun. And it was like a challenge. You'd be sitting there in this booth, like in this giant building in Chicago on the waterfront called McCormick Hall. And if you splurged, you had a carpet between your feet and the concrete floor, and you had a 3-meter square booth, and we'd have big photographs, and we'd usually have a sample of something medium size standing up, and the goal was people that walk by to get them to spend their money with us, and I'd go out, the people start to have chat, looking the other direction, and I would get them to come to my booth. And that was the challenge. That was great fun. One of the nice things about the business was that we got paid deposits on the larger orders, and the deposits really covered our costs, or say our working capital requirements, until we shipped material. So we did not have any loans at the bank.
So there was no cash flow problem. So apart from the dinosaurs and the guys in cowboy hats, what else was there? What were the really interesting guys that you were involved with?
We started seeing in the U.S. The marketing major company marketing arms were going to 3D figures, probably following what the lead that we had opened up. So we had a program with Uniroyal U.S. Rubber tires Miss Uniroyal, and she was built so she had a dress, and the dress came off and she had a bikini on underneath, which is pretty radical.
Seriously?
Seriously, yeah. There are some Miss Uniroyals still around. We probably the biggest franchise deal that we had, which at the time was in Boise, Idaho, where Linda was from, which we didn't know, was with an A&W root beer sub-franchisee that worked with A&W, and they had something called Papa Burger, Mama Burger, Baby Burger, and Teen Burger. We made a 4 set of figures for those. And probably the key element in that story is that when Linda and I were married, the night before we were married, I was kind of late getting my bachelor parties in. It was kind of co-ed, and the bars in this little town in Idaho where Linda was from, where we got married, closed at 10:30, and I was drinking double shots of tequila with beer chasers, and people started making me bets that I couldn't stand up and dance if I kept drinking like that. I won all the bets, but the next morning I was so sick. Literally, if it had not been a late afternoon wedding, I couldn't have made it. So when we left and when we went to a reception, which was in this little hotel where, like, you can imagine the gunfight taking place. You came down the stairs, a long narrow bar, and there were almost bullet holes around. But it was no air conditioning, and it was a state with that sold alcohol. The only place you could buy alcohol was through the state, and a terrible cheap champagne, and it smelled of that, and I was sick again. So we left and heading to the hotel. We were flying to Hawaii the next day on our honeymoon, and there was an A&W root beer stand. And I had not been able to keep anything down all day, and I had an A&W hamburger, a Papa Burger, and it tasted really good. So anyway, we probably did a program every couple of months for some sort of franchise, and which got us into building some fiberglass fascia and other things that came along with it. We ended up doing some really large items, big whales and a pirate ship.
What did you do the whales for?
It was a fish franchise. And the most difficult part of the business was dealing with the sculptors. And I learned very quickly, don't have anybody on the payroll. Get a fixed price and pay them on a percentage of completion basis with fixed marks, just like building a custom yacht. And don't be directly involved, because the artists were impossible to
because they got a view about it should look this way and it's not realistic and yeah.
Anyway, so it was we had all kinds of programs, and by the time we started to taper the business off, we were probably making presentations once a month to people about they were trying to set up new businesses.
So did you go into businesses and somebody who was, I don't know, selling children's clothes and say to them, what you need is a 25-foot tall gorilla? Is that how you did it?
No, actually, we looked at the business, and then we had the scale was, of course, the issue of, was it mobile or fixed? Most customers were fixed. Like for example, the amusement park industry, we moved a lot of material. Or in the restaurant business, we moved a lot of material. All these were fixed. It's really just the oil industry that people that were in business service in cars and trucks that wanted the mobile units. But we just put together. We'd look at their marketing, what it was and what they'd done before, and we had Vi had a couple of artists that she said work out to him that would do poster board presentation, and I would put these things in a case and carry them on board the airplane, put them beside the seat, and off I go. And when people saw this stuff, they somehow it really was. It was not a hard sell. They looked at it and they said, we got to do this. And the market, we had most customers ended up giving us endorsements that were really strong. And when you're a small retail establishment like the Larry Anderson, the gas station fellow in Las Vegas, those kind of business, they know every day what's happening with their sales. So it's easy for them to point to what happens, and then you would hear stories about people stopping to take photographs, and sometimes it was with the cows or steers, and the giant chicken or the Paul Bunyan type figures were the most prevalent talked about. And what we learned how to do as our quote unquote technology grew was how to adapt the original Paul Bunyan figure. So we had the original figure had a shirt. We ended up with a shirtless guy, just because, well, for muscle type situations and for sold a lot of Indian figures. We had different heads and different tools put in the arms, and so it was. We kept thinking we should do.
And tell me, did the dinosaurs start off as the quarter horse, or was that a whole new mould?
The dinosaurs started off as a 12-footer, and then we made an 8-footer, and we probably didn't sell enough to pay off the cost of making the plugs and molds, because that was a difficult thing to shape and control.
No, but it means that's quite rare, isn't it? Finding a dinosaur.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy them today. You can buy plastic. I'm pretty sure they're fiberglass dinosaurs from distributors who sell them to the Sinclair dealers. You just send them an order, and your unit will come a couple months later. But in the olden days, in order for us, we had to have something where we had the home company behind us, because otherwise we wouldn't sell enough.
And so, what happened to the business in the end? Did it just stop?
What happened in the end is I was unsuccessful in finding somebody that could sell the big programs, and I didn't want to travel, and we moved the business in a different direction, into the construction business, which was a story in itself, maybe for someday. But we went from a really fun business that cash flowed easily to a business in which every job was war.
And so, having decided that you were with Linda and you wanted to stay home, and the business, there was nobody who could actually sell the big programs, did you then sell the Muffler Men?
No, what happened was I knew it was still a part of our business. It's just that it wasn't getting my attention, because we had to do something else, and we had a lot of 15, 20 guys working for us. And I thought, I started becoming aware. Somebody told me about a job in New York State, upstate New York, where Nelson Rockefeller was building a monument to himself, and called the Albany South Mall, which at the time was planned to be the largest concrete structure ever made. And in all of my humility, I thought, well, we can do that. Fortunately, the first round of bidding failed because of various technical issues having to do with people fixing the prices, I think. And so the job went away, the prospect of it, which was a good thing, because we would have gone broke very quickly. So it eventually came back, and we eventually did get the order to supply the equipment. But that opened our eyes to concrete fiberglass forms, and I had no idea. I went from a fun business to one where you start every job, and it's going to end up as a lawsuit. That's just the nature, even with your friends. You paper yourself, you cross your T's, dot your I's, you cover everything that happens, every conversation. Well, I'll say at this point, we went from a really fun business to one that was a bloody fight for survival every day.
And that is the subject of another chapter. But in the meantime, just as we sort of finish with the Muffler Men, these incredible figures that are still famous. And so if you're going down Route 66, or you're in LA or around that part of the States, and you see one of these massive figures, just think about Steve, age 21, in his suit in the Texaco building, and think about how special that time was. So and that is the story of the Muffler Men. So thank you so much, Steve, for that.